everyone, welcome to episode 12. Roxy's grinning at me instead of going, woo, woo, and she should be going, woo, woo, woo. Yeah, that's more fitting, fair enough. So, I think this is the last episode of the season that we are doing this kind of chatty format. Mm-hmm. We've got a very interesting one coming up soon. So just a quick note to kind of explain this episode a bit. Rox and I have decided that we will be doing a Tools of the Trade episode every season, where we'll be looking at kind of what a paranormal investigator uses to detect ghosties, beasties and fairies. This episode we'll be looking at an EMF detector. Seems like the best place to start because this is the main component of every single investigator's toolkit. Rox, you have one of these. We've used it in our investigations. So I would love to know why you think it is a tool of choice when looking at ghosts and what led you to believe that this will work on them.
For me, when I've seen Most Haunted, Ghost Files, any sort of spooky related show, this is the item that they always have when they're wandering around. The little scanner that loads up from green to red if there's more EMF readings or if there's lower ones. And as far as I was concerned, the higher the EMF reading, the more likely it was there'd be spooky goings on or ghostly matter and things like that. It could be affected by cables or internal electrics. So a lot of the shows that I watched would do like a ground reading of it before they did the actual investigation, so they could double check that and then notice any spikes or flares that they hadn't seen in the base reading. I know that the Earth's core gives off its own electromagnetic field, but that's about it from my understanding there.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I expect. So this isn't, any kind of criticism. But what I see a lot is lots of people use EMF because other people use EMF. Rather than knowing specifically why they're using EMF. They think lots of paranormal investigators use EMF. Hell, in the game of Phasmophobia we use EMF. Yeah. That's it, that's what I need, that's gonna detect me some ghosties. And they're using EMF readers as is there a ghost right here, right now detector?
Yes.
But
that's why we wanted to do these tools of the trade, so that we could actually explain the validity of using these tools.
Yeah, exactly. If there's any particular reason for it.
The history of it.
Yeah, kind of if we shouldn't really be listening to what they are, which, a bit of a spoiler alert. As of right now, there isn't a fantastically concrete way of detecting a ghost. Draw your own conclusions from that. I'm going to try and dial back my skepticism a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone gets the point now. Before we get into the tools itself, let's break down what EMF stands for. EMF refers to electromagnetic fields. Now, again, we're kind of straying into the realms of physics, which isn't particularly my forte, but I will be doing my best to bring it justice and keep everything simple. Otherwise I'll confuse myself.
You'll also confuse me.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a thing in the science community which really does my head in, where the scientists baffle people with scientific words, and they make it so that the subject is really unapproachable. And it's so irritating because no one understands what they're saying. I get it sometimes. I'll be listening to something and I'm thinking, what the hell are you saying, pal? And then you see it in simpler terms and it makes perfect sense. So if you think my explanation is a bit too simple, that's, completely fair. This isn't, if you've got like a degree in physics, you're not learning anything new here. This is more of like a kind of like an intro, and if you want to read further into it and learn a lot more about it, by all means. I'm not qualified to give that spiel, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll try and avoid jargon where we can, or if there is some, we'll explain it.
Firstly, I think we need to define energy.
Let's do that, finally.
So energy is something incredibly intangible, but energy refers to the ability to do work or exert a force.
In physics.
There are two ways in which it can be categorised. Potential energy, which is energy that hasn't been exerted yet. For example, the energy stored in chemical bonds. This is kind of what I look at sometimes. Or kinetic energy, which is the energy that is being exerted. Canada's Science and Technology Museum had a really good example of this. So let's say you're holding a book in the air. Before letting it go, it has potential energy as it's being held up in a high position and could drop. Once you do let go of the book, the potential energy is converted into kinetic energy, which is the energy of the book falling. Making sense so far?
Yep, I got it.
Sick. So according to the law of conservation of energy, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and there is a finite quantity of it in our universe. A lot of the energy that we have on Earth derives from the sun in the form of electromagnetic radiation, and this energy is then converted into other forms of energy. When we discuss electromagnetism, we do so in the form of electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic waves are a type of radiation where the electric and magnetic fields are coupled and oscillate in perpendicular planes. For electromagnetic waves, their size is proportional to their energy. Larger equals lower energy. Radio waves are large, low energy waves, and X-rays are small, high energy waves, just to give some well-known examples. I'd like everyone to imagine a slinky. A pulled slinky and a stretched one represents a large wave, and a pushed-tight slinky represents a small wave, and that's proportional to their energy.
So it's a little bit like with tsunamis. When the wave is out at sea, because it's got more space, it's not necessarily going to be as harmful, whereas it only becomes that really massive, forceful push when the earth comes up more at the shore, because all the power and kinetic energy is condensed.
I like the analogy. I can't confirm if that's... Yeah, maybe.
Okay, cool, sure.
So, according to chemistry and light, electromagnetic radiation is called as such because it is emitted by electrically charged particles, like electrons, and will induce a mechanical force. Just to say, a mechanical force is force causing an object to change motion, and they will induce this mechanical force on other electronically charged particles at a distance.
Okay.
At this point, I need to acknowledge wave-particle duality, where entities like light exhibits both particle and wave characteristics.
So it can be the little dit, but it can also be like the...
Yes. Light can be described as being a light wave, or it can be described as a photon. It depends on what situation is being applied to.
Okay.
So I'm actually not going to go too much into that. That's straying into the realms of quantum mechanics.
Sure.
And one of the books I was researching in summed up my feelings for it fantastically, where it said, you might not have an understanding of quantum mechanics, but it still applies in the world around you. The same book also states that our language has evolved around our classic understanding of physics, and as such, our language might not be developed enough to properly communicate a better understanding of quantum mechanics. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more, because nothing baffles me more than that subject.
Absolutely, I can agree with you.
First of all, I don't know anyone who really understands quantum mechanics, so I'm sure that's going to wind up a lot of physicists. But in order for someone to understand something, they have to be able to explain it. Yeah. And I've never met someone who can sufficiently explain quantum mechanics.
And that's where my problem with chemistry comes, is I can probably understand it if you give me time. How it happens, the majority of my reason is because...
Yeah, and that's fine, you know. Just because you're not good at a particular subject doesn't mean anything, really. Yeah. Everyone has different abilities. But yeah, I like to try and keep things relatively simple-ish, because I probably don't have the understanding great enough to explain it in better detail.
If anyone does, please reach out.
Yeah, if someone could explain to me quantum mechanics, I would love to hear it. I genuinely would. So let's circle back to electromagnetic fields. What generates them? So Earth has a natural magnetic field, as Roxy mentioned earlier, and this is generated from the fluid outer core, where electrical currents flows in molten iron. The magnetic field at the surface of our Earth isn't actually uniform, and it ranges from 25 to 65 microtesla, depending on where you are.
Oh, Tesla. Interesting.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's in Gaussian units. So electricity, in terms of like transmission and distribution, is able to generate EMFs. The strength of the EMF is proportional to the amount of electrical current in transmission.
So the more electrical current moving, the bigger the EMF.
There would be far more EMF from a power line than from a mobile phone. Electromagnetics also generate EMF. I don't know if you remember, but there was when kind of mobile phones came into everyday usage, there was a hell of a lot of hysteria around it, in that people were really panicky about keeping phones in their pockets.
I worked for a gas and electricity company about 5 years ago. That's not an old thing. They still have phone calls coming in going, I'm not happy with smart meters going into my house because of the electromagnetic waves it's going to create.
It's not entirely unfounded,
No.
but in very small concentrations you really don't have much to worry about. Just to kind of refresh our vocab a bit, field refers to the distribution of force, and waves or radiation kind of describes energy transportation.
Okay.
So why do people think that EMF readers detect ghosts?
So as far as I'm aware, it's because of the spiritualist movement in the 19th century. Some physicists wanted to try and science out the connection between the spiritual world and our world. I think their names were Stewart and Trait, and they proposed that electromagnetic fields could be that link between our world and the spiritual world, and they could then impact that on their side, and it would trickle through onto our side. That's all I know about it.
Right. And that's pretty much what I've kind of read as well. The going theory is that ghosts are capable of manipulating EMFs. However, I couldn't really find any credible evidence on this. Now, I know Rox and I have a disagreement about the word credible, so I'm just going to flesh out what I mean by credible evidence. I mean, when I say credible evidence, I mean we look at everything else around it and we are able to rule out every single other possibility. So in order for something to be credible, the evidence cannot be explained by something else. It has to be linked to the phenomena that we are trying to prove or disprove, which is why I say there isn't credible evidence. I know Rox has a different definition.
Yeah, so my definition of the word credible is just that it means truth. So having credible evidence does mean similar to you that everything else has been ruled out, but like, for example, you say we've not got credible evidence for it. Well, I argue we've not got credible evidence against it either. So it's just a semantic, essentially.
No, I understand that. I think in a lot of... Okay, the burden of proof is on, the
My
person...
side.
Yeah, the burden of proof is on your side. That's the way that we judge things. It's the way that it's kind of always been judged. You have to prove that something exists rather than disprove that it does. I mean, that's how we use our court systems anyway.
Some court systems.
UK court systems.
There's another court system in the US where the burden of proof is flipped. You have to prove that you didn't do it.
I mean, yeah, but the burden of proof is on the person who says it exists. In my opinion, to be completely blunt, most attempts to find anything about how EMFs are linked to ghosts is met with scathing articles written by various people implying that people who believe in ghosts and use EMFs to detect them are sillies, which is the nice switch out for it, and that people who use EMF readers do so because they look vaguely fancy-ish and scientific, they light up and they take a measurement. And for some people, that's all it needs to do. I mean, and in a way, it does seem a little silly to try and use an EMF when there is, again, nothing that really suggests that they do anything in terms of paranormal detection, right?
Well, there were some cases back in the 1800s where they were able to measure a medium who managed to make her own electromagnetic field on her skin spike at will. And that was sort of like an early form of an EMF reader, so I also don't know how much I trust things from the 1800s, however, in terms of scientific validity, so...
100%.
But that is a case that was studied. She was able to make her electromagnetic field spike.
That doesn't sound entirely outlandish to me in my understanding of it. Humans do generate an EMF, and I'm sure that there are anomalies where people generate stronger EMFs than others, and perhaps that does explain some of the sensitivities. Maybe they are able to detect other fields that maybe would go unnoticed by the everyday person. I'd say that that's not too outlandish, and it could have a very, very decent explanation, so there could be plenty of reason why she can, it might be true, who knows? Not me, so I'm not going to argue against that.
Unfortunately, we can't time travel.
Tragic. I do think there is another reason that ghosts may be linked to EMFs.
Ooh.
So it has been put forward that strong EMFs can cause hallucinations and can contribute to seizures in epilepsy sufferers.
Okay.
So in a lab setting, a strong EMF can cause the subjects to see lights appear in the form of discs, line and blurs, and when the field or subject moves, the light moves as well. Now, this does sound quite similar to the orbs that get seen quite often, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mind you, orbs are a weird thing, though, because how do you then explain people that are watching recorded footage of something and spot an orb, or live streaming that? Because I've watched, for example, Most Haunted, when they were doing a live stream in a haunted location, and I was sat watching it on my TV and with the live streams of other locations in front of me and seeing orbs flying around. So that's an interesting question there, because I'm not in that place. How could I have been affected by those EMF readings?
Yeah, 100%. And I do need to add that this effect is induced by a very, very strong superconducting magnet, and the effect is not something that is easily tested outside of a laboratory setting. However, in the article it does mention that it's a possible explanation for ball lightning, which is something that you mentioned in our Will-o'-the-Wisps episode.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's usually seen either in bogs where chemicals have gone up, or in thunderstorms where I imagine there's a lot of electromagnetic activity.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So another source I found postulates that acute exposure to EMFs may make it more likely for a epileptic seizure to occur in an epilepsy sufferer independent of exposure time. This does definitely need more research to it. I'm not saying that that is the truth, I'm just kind of letting you know of something I found. It's worth mentioning. I think if areas have very, very high EMFs and people are struggling with hallucinations and, let's say maybe it does trigger a couple of seizures, that could be a really terrifying atmosphere to walk into, you know?
And if you think about the idea of these waves as well waves cause vibrations too, and that could then cause maybe your eyes to wobble in your socket or your brain to move around a little bit and therefore create other effects.
I don't know.
No?
I don't know about vibrations. I think that's very...
I read a study on it a little while ago about this group who made a haunted house experiment to see if EMF and infrared sound had an impact on people seeing things, and what they found was that people who believed in ghosts already would be more likely to see things.
Yeah.
Of course.
That's what you said about being primed, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And they said something in that report about vibrations as well could cause visual anomalies on your eyes because your eyeballs are vibrating in your socket in a way they're not supposed to.
Okay, I mean, I haven't read anything about eyeball vibration in terms of electromagnetic fields. I wasn't saying that mockingly, I was saying that seriously. I haven't. It might well, that might well be true. I'm just saying, I don't know. But that's, if that is true, that could be a really interesting additional piece of evidence. So, considering the adverse effects that very strong EMFs do have on people, do you think it is likely that those effects of a very, very strong EMF could be mistaken for the ghost sightings rather than a ghost actually being present?
I don't know, is my bottom line, I think.
Fair enough.
And I'm not afraid to say I don't know, because I genuinely don't.
That's all right.
I would need to see an example, and I think it would need to be arranged on a case-by-case basis, purely because how long are they being exposed to for it? What kind of wave are they being exposed to? I know you said strong EMFs, so is that the short ones or the long ones?
So strong, as in high-energy electromagnetic waves, are the short ones, and those are the ones that can be very damaging to you.
Okay, so if we were comparing those people who have been exposed to X-rays for too long, they tend to get physical burns on that impacted area.
Yeah.
So would it not exhibit in that way as opposed to hallucinations and things like that? Why is it only affecting our cranial nerve system?
I would imagine that if it was happening in a lab setting with live subjects, they would be very careful to not cause lasting damage. And we're discussing fields as well, not waves.
True, yeah, sorry, I get confused.
No.
It's
okay, and that's kind of why I went back and was fields to do with distribution, waves to do with the energy actually being transported around.
I don't know, is the bottom line. They could be. I don't know. I think I'd like to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. I'm not trying to nail you down to a particular answer now. It's physics, and physics is bloody complicated.
It's interesting to see the different theories behind it and what could be leading to the physical things that we associate with ghosts.
I just want to remind everyone about underground power lines. Just because there isn't an overhead power line that you can see, it doesn't mean that there isn't any in the area. So in some cases where they're going, we've got really, really strong EMF readings, and there's no power lines overhead, doesn't mean that there isn't any underneath them.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something to kind of throw in there as well. So has anything changed your mind at all from the start of the episode, or do you just think that maybe something's missing that could link everything?
I think that what this has made me consider is that we need to make sure we are taking baseline readings before we start any kind of investigation, or if there are spirits out there, ask them to come and speak to us. We need to figure out what the baseline is so that we know moving forward what is abnormal. And I think there is more that needs to be investigated in this, because we mentioned about underground electrocurrents and that the Earth generates its own EMF.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the Earth generates its own EMF, then it would make sense, like, for example, how there is volcanoes in certain places and some areas are more likely to have volcanoes and earthquakes. Would it not make sense then that certain areas would be more likely to have geomagnetic field spikes?
I think, like I said, their EMF field of the Earth isn't uniform all over the world. It varies from 25 to 65 microtesla. Yeah. So there could be places that have stupid high electromagnetic fields and other places that have quite a low one.
Yeah, so part of me does wonder about, like, because Britain has, in theory, one of the highest ghost to square mile ratios or something like that, in theory.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if there is something to do with that in the UK. And I know the UK is supposed to be like a massive hotspot for ley lines, which is like energy lines drawn between different points. I don't know if that's energy, is therefore electromagnetic. I don't know if it's the spooky energy.
See, this is the thing, and I'm going to not get wound up about it this time. When they say energy, it's really tricky to define what that energy is. Because if we're talking mystical, magical, spooky, emotional energy, in my mind that's not energy, and I don't know anything at all about that really. But if we're talking energy is measurable, to a degree. We can, things can be done to determine that, and I think that's where there needs to be a clear distinction between what you're actually saying when you say energy. That's a little bit why I went to define energy in terms of physics at the start of this discussion, because the whole vague energy, it really does wind me up, because I just have absolutely no idea what the other person is saying is energy.
Part of me wonders, having delved into like alternative therapies and things like that, as to whether when they say energy, they do mean like electromagnetic field, because I've been sat there, someone doing like a Reiki session on me, and I felt that heat as they're working and building the energy, and I'm putting that in air quotes just to please you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So it's what they're manipulating there, is they're being able to hook into your system for that you generate yourself and manipulate it. And I think that is how they link up with Qi in Eastern medicine. So I wonder if that is what they mean, as energy potentially is just electromagnetic fields.
I think this is something we're going to need to look into further.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, I'm not going to stand here and go, nonsense. I don't, at the end of the day, the answer is I don't know what energies, they're referring to. I'm not going to shoot down your idea, because I just don't know. And science is constantly evolving. It's why it's really important to keep an open mind. And whilst I don't think that ghosts have anything to do with EMF manipulation, other than maybe it kind of being attributed to them, I think that we should continue to use an EMF reader in our investigations, because in my mind there's never such a thing as too many measurements and too much data. And it could be really, really useful to see if there are any light sightings linked to an absolutely bonkers high EMF reading. Yeah,
definitely. And also, if EMF is very present and active in the area, that is something we need to be aware of too, because that could be impacting other things.
Absolutely. And I am going to reiterate a previous point from my disclaimer of data about how good equipment needs to be calibrated routinely. And a lot of these EMFs that you buy online are just from Amazon or something, or some like spooky website or whatever, and they're not equipment that is properly maintained or calibrated, and of course you can get false readings from that equipment negligence, to explain. So are there any final thoughts?
Yeah, we need to figure out how to calibrate our EMF reader.
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually want to see if we can find somewhere to send equipment off to.
Pat test it.
I think that's just for electrical safety.
I mean, we should probably do that anyway.
Yeah, probably. I think it's a battery operated thing, so no. I don't know why I agree, but in the future maybe we'll invest in some proper quality equipment and find people who do the calibrations on the good stuff, because I don't think anyone's going to calibrate like a however much the EMF reader was. I'd
be really interested to see what the data is compared between EMF readers and other things like REM pods, which are supposed to also measure electromagnetic fields but also temperature, so they communicate it in different ways. And if there is anything scientifically that proves one is more useful or better than the other at measuring these fields. And in future I would be really interested to upgrade our equipment later to non-ghost affiliated things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if it's known that it's for ghost hunting or from a site where it's for ghost hunting, then it's more likely to be whack it in a spooky package, ship it out. Whereas if it's an actual scientific level measuring device, I feel like the calibration is going to be a little bit finer.
I'll tell you what, I'll check. I'll have a look at some of the lab equipment places that we go to.
Cool.
Shout out to Perkin Elmer if you can give me a fat discount on the EMF reader.
Yeah.
Or Thermo Fisher UT. Yeah.
But I find it really interesting that there has been experiments around this, and a lot of it's just been proven as like, yeah, nothing proves ghosts exist. Not with this anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some things where you can be like, damn, that's pretty uncanny. But there's nothing that we currently have access to that definitively proves the existence of ghosts, which makes me think they're not real. However, because everything we know about science and technology is constantly evolving, it's important to keep that open mind.
Yeah. And I agree, I just think we haven't found it yet, or found what we need to test for it.
I mean, I don't think we ever will, but...
Maybe in our lifetime.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
That was our episode on EMFs. I hope you found it informative.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is our second to last episode, and I hope you've enjoyed the season so far. I've really enjoyed doing this podcast, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, me too. It's been such a fantastic activity today.
So you can find us on Threads, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, Spotify. Is there anywhere else?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah. So please feel free to hit us up on that. And if you see any videos or posts or anything that you'd like us to talk about or explore, please tag us in it.
At Sitnos.
#SITNOS. And we also have our email address, scaredatthenameofscience@gmail.com, which if you have anything you want to tell us about and want us to analyse or deep dive into, please send it there with any pictures or images that you have so we can take a little look and see.
And if you are an expert in quantum mechanics, please, please, please email me and explain what on earth is going on there, because I just truly do not understand it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, guys.